What up, people? If there's one thing you need to know about me, is that I love RPGs. And the only thing I love more than RPGs is saving money. And because there are so many RPGs out there to buy, I thought it'd be a good idea to recommend some for people who may be on a tight budget. I picked these games based off their full price cost, and I did that because now, no matter when you watch this video, whether the game is on sale or not, they'll never cost more than $20 digitally. Another thing is, all of these games aren't on every single platform, unfortunately. Most of them are, but some of them skipped over a couple consoles for whatever reason. Also, if you're new to the channel, I make videos on single player games with a heavy focus on RPGs. If that's something that interests you and you end up enjoying this video, consider subscribing or just hitting that like button to help spread this video around. And with that, here are 10 must-buy RPGs that are all under $20. Starting off the list, we have Monster Sanctuary. This game is a monster collecting game featuring Metroidvania-like side view visuals, exploration, and also challenging turn-based combat. Monster Sanctuary is a land where monster keepers live in harmony with the monsters that they raise, but the arrival of unusually powerful monsters has broken the peace among the land. Join one of the monster keepers on his journey as he travels to unravel this mystery. When it comes to combat, utilize an integrated combo system and unique skill trees while exploiting enemy weaknesses to defeat your foes. Play strategically to earn rewards for efficient combat completion. After defeating enemies, there's a chance for a monster egg to drop. Hatch those eggs to increase the size of your party. Creating a versatile team allows you to adapt to changing enemies and develop unique playstyles. Outside of combat, specific monsters possess abilities to open new areas for the player to explore. One of the things I liked about the game was how each monster had their own skill tree to use. One of my monsters I prioritized speed and attacking, and another one I made sure he could eat hits and give stat buffs. Unlike other monster collecting games, those individual skill trees really made me feel like I was creating a balanced team. And even though I personally don't like the Metroidvania aspect because I hate backtracking, the gameplay was so much fun, I didn't mind it at all. What's actually funny is that I thought I owned this game because I vividly remember playing it, but it turns out that it was actually on Game Pass, and since it's not on Game Pass anymore, I picked it up to play on my Steam Deck, and if you ever wanted a Pokemon Castlevania crossover game, I think you should pick it up for your platform of choice as well. Next up, we have SteamWorld Heist. The game is a 2D turn-based tactics shooter developed by Image Inform and is also the third installment of the criminally underrated SteamWorld series, and I think technically a sequel to SteamWorld Dig 2. The core gameplay consists of recruiting a team of robots, boarding enemy spaceships, and taking down rival robot factions in turn-based shootouts. In battle, the player controls the aiming of all firearms and can bounce bullets off the environment to help kill enemy robots hiding behind cover. As the game progresses, players can upgrade and customize the robot crew with different consumables, equipment, weapons, and hats. Also, to help with aiming, some weapons are equipped with laser sights. The game has over 100 different weapons and almost 100 hats to collect. These can be found as treasure during missions or bought in designated shops. Hats are primarily obtained by shooting them off of opponents' heads and collecting them. Outside of gameplay, SteamWorld Heist, like most SteamWorld games, has a very cool aesthetic to it. A lot of steampunk robots you recruit have very unique designs, and when you talk to them in between missions, you'll most likely have a very humorous interaction. When it comes to strategy games, Fire Emblem is my favorite franchise by far, but SteamWorld Heist is actually the first strategy game I've ever played. Without it, I would have missed out on games like Fire Emblem Three Houses, Triangle Strategy, Midnight Suns, and plenty of other amazing games in the genre. So, if you're in the market for a new strategy RPG that won't break the bank, SteamWorld Heist is definitely one of the most charming options out there. At number 8, we have Citizen Sleeper. The game is a tabletop RPG developed by Jump Over the Age and I believe was released on all platforms in 2022. In the game, you'll be playing as a sleeper, which is a human whose mind has been digitized and has been put into a robot body to be controlled by the Ascent Arp Corporation. Your sleeper has escaped indentured servitude on a freighter and arrives at a space station called the Eye, where they fight for both survival and freedom. During your playthrough, you'll meet different people who represent different factions and interests, and it's up to you to decide who you want to spend your time with. To progress the plot, survive, and escape the Eye, the player rolls a number of dice each in-game day. These dice are then placed into different tasks where higher numbers generally indicate better outcomes. You also must constantly work in order to feed yourself and care for your degrading robot body, which requires specialized materials to upkeep. I remember playing this when it was on Game Pass, and I really enjoyed how you only had a certain amount of time each day to do specific things. Normally I would hate that because I want to experience every storyline between the characters like you do in Persona games, but with this game I didn't mind it for some reason. It's like I was creating my own unique story route, if that makes any sense. I did, however, find myself always wanting more dice to use, but that again is just me being greedy and wanting the perfect outcome with every decision. Citizen Sleeper is a very narrative and character focused RPG that lends itself to multiple playthroughs, and I strongly recommend you give it a try, especially if you can catch it on sale. Next on the list, we have Coromon. This game is your standard turn-based monster taming game, similar to that of Pokemon, but where Coromon differs is its combat system. Coromon uses stamina or SP to use moves as opposed to Pokemon, which just has moves with a varied number of uses. The stronger a move, the more stamina it costs, and therefore will make your SP go down much faster. If you run out of SP, you can skip a turn and rest, which will bring back half of your SP, or you can rest at any time if you want to prevent yourself from running out. This stamina system leads to battles being much more challenging yet never feeling too daunting or difficult. Also, there's no gym leaders in the game. Instead, you'll have 6 Titan battles, which are pretty much just boss battles that are tied to the main story and can be very difficult if not prepared. Speaking of story, I believe last year there was a huge update across all platforms for the game where they added a lot more content, including a new reworked story, which makes this a perfect time to jump in if you're interested. While playing the game, one of the things that stood out to me personally was how good the designs for a lot of the Coromon are. I can't speak for others, but good or bad monster designs can really make or break a monster entertainment game for me. The gameplay can be challenging and fun, but if you don't like how the monsters you're catching look, what does it matter? Thankfully, designs of the creature you'll be collecting is easily one of the best parts of the game. So if you're someone who prefers Pokemon entries from the old Game Boy days, but want more content, gameplay mechanics, and quality of life enhancements, then Coromon was literally made for you. At number 6, we have Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. This open-world action RPG was released all the way back in 2014 and takes place between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. In the game, you'll play as a ranger by the name of Talion who seeks revenge on the forces of Sauron after his family, consisting of his wife and son, are killed by those that led them. Players travel across locations in the game through parkour, riding monsters, or going through forge towers, which serve as fast travel points. The combat in Shadow of Mordor has been compared to that of the Batman Arkham series, which involves using melee attacks and counters to build your combo multiplier. But unlike Batman, you'll also have weapons such as swords, bows, and daggers. But forget about all that, let's talk about the best part of this game, which is the Nemesis system. There are plenty of videos going into much deeper detail about it, but to give a brief explanation, the Nemesis system is basically a villain generator that makes your deaths much more impactful. In the game, there's a board of orcs. At the top, there are really strong orcs, and at the bottom, there are weak foot soldiers. While in the open world, if you happen to run into one of the weaker ones and manage to kill you somehow, they can potentially move up the ranks to become even stronger and also much harder to kill. So essentially you're being punished for every death, and if you happen to lose to the same orc 3 or 4 times, they might end up turning into like a mini Dark Souls boss. There were so many times that I lost to a random enemy 1 or 2 times, only for him to be so strong that next time I saw them, I had to run away. But that's what made the game so much more fun for me and so many others. Even though I like this game a lot, it's far from perfect. My main gripe with the game is that it becomes very repetitive after a while, like extremely repetitive. The sequel more so than this one, but the gameplay loops gets really stale, so if that starts to happen to you, maybe take a break or just zero in on the story missions for a while like I did. But even with the few issues I do have with the gameplay, which is greatly enhanced by the aforementioned Nemesis system, makes this an RPG series that I think everyone should experience. Starting off the top 5, we have Valkyria Chronicles. This tactical RPG was originally published by Sega for the PS3 in 2008 and eventually was remastered and was available on all platforms by 2018. Set in a fictitious continent reminiscent of the 1930s, Valkyria Chronicles depicts Europa divided and ruled by 2 superpowers, the Empire and the Federation. Within this struggle, a hero named Vulcan and his fellow soldiers of the Gallian militia Squad 7 are fighting back against the invasion and the Empire's attempts to unify the continent under its power. Valkyria Chronicles features a unique turn-based battle system called Blitz, which stands for Battle of Live Tactical Zones. Between turns, the player views an overhead map in command mode, but zooms in to control each individual unit on the battlefield during action mode. Movement and other actions are handled in real time during action mode, though limited by an action point gauge that varies for each character. During target mode, the player is in direct control of character's aim while the action freezes allow for headshots and other maneuvers. Taking command of individual units during the player's phase costs command points, which can be used to either grant movement to many different units or the same unit consecutively with diminishing AP, depending on what the player wants to accomplish. Like I briefly touched on during my Steamrolled Heist section, ever since I played Fire Emblem Three Houses, I've really gotten into the strategy tactical RPG genre. Creating a balanced army, playing out your moves, and trying to be 3 steps ahead of your enemy is all very satisfying, and even with the game being a little dated, Valkyria Chronicles gives me that same level of satisfaction. Just outside of a top 3 spot, we have The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky. This turn-based RPG is the first of the Trails franchise and also the first of the Trails in the Sky trilogy. The game follows protagonist Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua, who journey through the country of Liberal to train to become senior bracers, which are members of non-government multinational organizations that act to keep the peace and protect civilians. Like I said earlier, combat is turn-based and takes place also on a grid. The character's turn order is determined by a tracker called the AT bar. During the character's turn, the player can move or make an attack. In addition to the normal attack, each character also has 3 other methods available for action: arts, crafts, and S-crafts. Arts are magic spells characters can use to attack opponents or support teammates, but must take an additional turn to cast. Crafts are character-specific abilities that are similar to arts, but can be used in the same turn. However, they utilize a special gauge called craft points for the cost to perform. S-crafts, however, are powered-up crafts that can be performed once a character has over 100 CP, but completely depletes the CP gauge upon using it. Further extending S-crafts are S-breaks, which allow characters to immediately use an S-craft regardless of when their turn order is. Like mentioned before, Trails in the Sky is the first game in the Trails series, which I think extends to, I believe, 8 or 9 games by now. What got me personally interested in the game was actually a video made by Mr. Matty Plays from Retro Rebound, in which he talks about this game and the series. He goes to a lot of detail about the combat, story, characters, and the endless amount of world building and how it all becomes better with each game, while also being very connected to each other. He really sold me on what this game has to offer, and if you want to hear more about this game and series, I highly recommend checking this video out. I'll just leave the link in the description for you. The reason this game isn't higher on the list is because unfortunately this game is only available right now on PC. But it's a pretty old RPG, so if you have a handheld PC like the Steam Deck or just an old gaming laptop, you should be able to play it easily, I would imagine. Also, a lot of other games in this series are on multiple platforms, so you won't be stuck on PC the entire time unless you want to. But anyway, if you're looking for a fun turn-based RPG that prides itself on story, characters, and world building, then The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky is the first step in the right direction. Starting off the top 3 is Crosscode. This game is an action RPG and is constantly compared to 2D Zelda games because of its puzzles and various dungeons. As Leia, a mute who's lost her memory, you'll be exploring the fictional MMORPG known as Crossworlds to try and regain your memory. And as her memory returns, a deep mystery surrounding Crossworlds will be unraveled. The combat system involves attacking enemies in real time using either a melee strike or a ranged ball launch. Players can also dodge or block enemy counterattacks. Attacking earns experience points and circuit points. Experience points increase the player's stats, and circuit points can be spent on a circuit board that allows the player to choose between different ability bonuses. During combat, the player has a rank which increases until the end or run from battle, rewarding them for continuous combat. Higher ranks let the player gain rare items and also heal faster. When engaging in combat or while solving puzzles, the player can instantaneously switch between different elements, each granting Leia different puzzle solving and attack abilities. As the game progresses, the player unlocks more elements by visiting different dungeons, each of which culminates in a boss fight. Back when I played this game, the combat outside of dungeons was what I enjoyed the most. The combat in the game was very fast and fluid and never felt too chaotic, at least not for me. No matter how much stuff was happening on screen, it all felt manageable, if that makes any sense. Crosscode really excels when it comes to combat, story, visuals, and also music. And like I said earlier, if you're a fan of 2D Zelda games or just action RPGs in general, Crossroad is definitely one of the best in the genre. Just missing out on the number 1 spot, we have Persona 4 Golden. This JRPG is an enhanced re-release of Persona 4, which originally launched for the PlayStation Vita. If you don't know anything about the series, the Persona games mixes turn-based combat with social life elements. As far as combat goes, you plus up to 3 other characters will explore randomly generated dungeons, each tailored around a victim who has been kidnapped. On each floor of a dungeon, the player may find roaming shadows as well as treasure chests containing items and equipment. Players progress through the dungeon by finding the stairs somewhere on each floor to progress to the next, eventually reaching the final floor where a boss enemy awaits. Gain the advantage during combat by scoping out elemental weaknesses by utilizing abilities with physical, fire, ice, wind, electricity, light, dark, and almighty. But keep in mind that based on you and your party's personas, you'll also have strength and weaknesses as well. By exploiting an enemy's weakness or performing a critical attack, the player can knock them over, granting the attacking character an additional move, whilst the enemy may also be granted an additional move if they target a player's character weakness. If the player knocks all of the enemies down, they may be granted the opportunity to perform an all-out attack, which all the players rush to down enemies to inflict heavy damage. Some of the gameplay changes found in the re-release of this game include a new dungeon, social links, locations, and also an expanded calendar. If you already played any of the other Persona games like Persona 5 Royal or the recent release Persona 3 Reload, then I'm sure you'll get to this one eventually. But if you haven't played any of the Persona games that I just mentioned, I would actually recommend playing this one first. The reason I say that is because since Persona 3 Reload and Persona 5 Royal have a lot more modern features, mechanics, and also quality of life enhancements, it might be hard to go from one of those games back to 4 Golden. Now, it wasn't that difficult for me, but that was probably because I had played Persona 5 for the first time like in 2020 or something like that. But it might be harder for other people who aren't used to playing older RPG titles. Also, while not really a negative, from what I remember, the first 2 to 3 hours of this game is pretty much just set up for the story and no real gameplay. Even someone like me, who's a big story person, got a little annoyed at how long it took to get to an actual fight. Not a reason not to buy the game, but I just figured I would mention it. Turn-based RPGs are some of my favorite type of RPGs to play outside of open world ones. And if your tastes are anything close to mine, Persona 4 Golden is an RPG you definitely should check out, and thankfully it won't cost a lot to do so. And at number 1, we have Final Fantasy VII. With this being one of the most popular RPGs of all time, I feel like it would be a waste to explain the game to you, so instead I'll briefly talk about my experience playing it for the first time a couple months ago in January. First and foremost, this is easily one of the best and probably my favorite cast of characters in any game I've ever played, let alone an RPG. The characters in the game all feel fleshed out, and despite their main goal being the same, they all have very different and distinct personalities, motives, and perspectives on everything that happens to them. The main story is also amazing with a lot of twists, character development, betrayals, and some surprising alliances. Moving over to combat, the materia system might be one of my favorite game mechanics of all RPGs I've ever played. The thing I like the most about it is that it can be as simple or as complex as you want. You could give everyone their own element material to use in an additional buff or debuff spell and call it a day. Or you can play around with different combinations and see what works with specific character strengths and weaknesses and have some really incredible builds. While I didn't do much of it during my first playthrough, when I eventually play through it again, I'll definitely spend more time playing around with different attacks, spells, and summon materials. The music in this game is also nothing short of exceptional. Just the other day I went to Spotify and added so many songs from the game's soundtrack to my library. It's funny because I'm trying to sell you on a game most of you already know about, but because I played it for the first time it feels new to me, but whatever. Now, while Final Fantasy VII is easily one of my favorite RPGs ever, despite me just recently playing it, I still have two major gripes with the game, the biggest one being the map navigation. Don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily need my hand held while playing games or be told exactly where to go every second of the game, but there are so many times where I had no clue where to go. Either they would name a specific city to go back to that I didn't know how to get back there because the map doesn't label any of the cities or towns, or they would just end the conversation and kick you to the map and you're supposed to just figure out where you're supposed to go by yourself. Thankfully I used a guide after a while due to frustration, but I don't know how people played this back in the day without getting frustrated. My other only real issue was how I felt like there were a lot of unnecessary mini-games or mini-game elements to stuff. For example, at one point in the game you have to go through this snowstorm, and while you're walking the camera spins around and you have to leave markers down so you don't get lost. And then while you're climbing up a mountain you have to continue to tap a button to warm yourself up so Cloud doesn't freeze to death. A lot of that stuff just felt tacked on and unnecessary just to add more game elements to things, and even though it didn't bother me at first, as the game kept going on it just got more and more annoying. To be fair, while I was playing this for the first time in January, I was trying to get through it somewhat quickly so I had enough time to also get through Final Fantasy Remake for the first time before Rebirth release, so that could have something to do with it. But despite the few criticisms I do have with the game, it's easily one of the best games I've ever played. There's very few RPGs that can give you a complete package of amazing gameplay, story, and music. Final Fantasy VII is regarded by many, including myself, as one of the greatest RPGs ever made. And to be able to experience that on any current platform you want for under $20 is a deal no one should pass up. But I'm really interested to hear from you guys. What are some RPGs you recommend to people who may be on a tight budget? Let us know in the comments. If you want some more RPG content from me, link to the playlist will be in the description below, or you can click the link on the screen. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with the channel. Later.